We talked earlier about why NATO would not be involved, and I'm not just talking about the no-fly zone. I'm talking about in any other way, because it would extrapolate into World War III. Let me ask you kind of a really dumb question: Is the biggest fear that the nuclear fear? Like, for instance, if the nuclear question was off the table, would that be as big a concern to NATO? Because it seems like what Ukraine is doing to them, if you were to throw in first generation armies, the Russians would be in a world of hurt when it comes to the conventional war. Am I right?
No. I mean, if U.S. I hate to give air guys props because ones that do the hardships, and guys like Don Bentley and some of our other buddies that are authors who are now turning into writers who eat it up. And I don't want to give that 1 inch, but I will say is kind of an infantry and artillery fight. It's a relatively two-dimensional fight because there's no one has air supremacy, no one has air superiority. Two different definitions, two very different things. There's temporary air superiority where the Russians tend to be the ones that gain it and then are able to kind of use unrestricted air warfare against the ground. But it's so limited because of the amount of stingers and impacts. You can even just watch the videos online and you can see proof of, just flying at like 30 feet off the hard deck, literal hard deck, not the kind of air, the Navy's version of hard deck, which is like 2,000 feet. Sorry, Navy guys. We dealt with that in Iraq, Afghanistan. So it's a great question. And I think talking about NATO's involvement is the hardest thing in the world. I'll say, I personally don't believe that there's any chance of nuclear or chemical. I believe that Putin is nuts. I think he's a megalomaniac. I think that much like the character that he is supposed to be in my book, by the way, who is exactly the same kind of character and does the same kind of things, and make big decisions because they see weakness. I think that's very Russian. I perceive that you are not going to do anything about it, so I'm now going to take a step that I believe I can do, whether that's world leadership, whether that's us pulling out of Afghanistan willy-nilly. There's a lot of indications, I think, that Russia looked at it and said, aha, we have an upper hand. I mean, a divided America is a perfect example. I wish to death that we could get America to unite, and also obviously all the nations as well, because they would stop it. There's a lot of things that could have prevented this. I believe 18th Airborne Corps' whole means for existence as the GRF is to fly to Poland with 26,000 dudes and dudettes and just go, we're over here with frickin' with our knives and we're ready to take it. That's a deterrent. I mean, ship the USS Teddy Roosevelt and put it in the North Sea and you have a deterrent, nuclear included. I personally don't think he will. So I really hope that I'm right, because Russia has a class of tactical nuclear weapons that I wrote about in my book also. I'm not doing shameless plugs for my books. It's just a lot of this stuff I did discuss in the book because I believe strongly that this kind of thing could happen. And so, it was easy for me to write because I kind of war gamed it when I was in the Pentagon and then and said, well, this is kind of what a big what if. I mean, red metal I think we're batting, at least a 4-4 right now because we've done a lot of stuff right, including that armored train, by the way.
I know.
I mean, I had a lot of people nuts. Like, armored train, no one uses trains, like. And then that thing started rolling down the track. I'm like, boom. So hashtag boom. So my kids give me a hard time for the hashtag. So my perception on this is that the biggest fright from a Ukrainian perspective is that the U.S. believes in strategic nuclear weapons only. I was the nuclear officer in the Pentagon of the United States Marine Corps. I mean, we don't have any nuclear weapons in the Marine Corps, but my duty was to ensure that I was keeping an eye on how the Navy and Air Force were doing the nuclear stuff and watch expenditures and see where there was Marine Corps equity. So you can imagine I was constantly kind of having to educate myself on what it meant, and I had to go to DC think tanks and learn about nuclear strategy and the nuclear triad, how they're employed, et cetera. America's belief is that if you use one nuke, regardless of yield, against a NATO country, we will nuke you back. So we are able to choose, meaning if you use one nuke against Poland, we will use something in kind. We don't tell you what it will be. It would be stupid to do. You're clear on what that means. So Russia has a different philosophy. as we have gone through the START treaty, START 1, START 2, START 3, the SALT treaties, these are all strategic arms limitation talks, strategic arms reductions. And the intent is, hey, look, Russia, President Obama, for instance, said, I want to strike out of the U.S. arsenal X number of munitions. And I think we were going to do 2,600. I can't remember where we ended up with. And I'm sleep battle because I was literally on the board dealing with how quickly we would reduce. Russia does it in kind. And it has always been that way. There have been times in the Cold War where it wasn't. Our strategic nuclear stockpile was astronomical. We're now down to less than 12,000 apiece of strategic ICBMs, or also the cruise missiles that we have, nuclear cruise missiles. Russia has another stockpile that we don't really acknowledge that are tactical nuclear weapons. We used to have those. In fact, the U.S. Army had a bazooka that fired a nuclear missile, which cannot imagine operating the nuclear bazooka, but they have a nuclear artillery piece. I mean, even that to me would be, you're firing a nuclear weapon 30 kilometers away. Oh joy, I'm still feel like I'm going to get irradiated, at least with gamma radiation by the time the thing detonates. So Russia still has a fairly large stockpile. They've never had to account for it. It's never really been a part of SALT and START treaties, but not much. Like I said, I put it in one of my books because if they see it as an acceptable battlefield weapon. I have lost X number of troops, tanks, soldiers, combat aviation, etc. I now use a large yield weapon. It happens to be nuclear, but it only affects this radius. This is Russian thinking. They don't really acknowledge, a nuclear winter. They don't really acknowledge fallout as much as we do. They don't acknowledge alpha, beta, gamma radiation. Gamma is immediate and can cause, immediate effects on the body. We know that from Hiroshima. Alpha and beta systems. Gamma can go through 2 inches of lead. Alpha, you have to breathe it in the air, but it will sit on dust for a long time. And you are a farmer and you are near Chernobyl and you can understand what will happen. You will get the effects of that. By the way, my wife is a surgeon. I think we've talked about her before, but she has had an astronomical number of people from the Ukraine, from around Chernobyl in the past 10 years, who have thyroid cancer. So that's alpha and beta radiation that has affected them long term. So we acknowledge all of that. Russia doesn't. Russia says, no, this is just a high yield warhead. So the concern is if you use a tactical weapon because the enemy has an advantage over you, Russia believes, well, it only affects a 50-mile radius. That's got nothing to do with NATO. We look at it differently. So that's my biggest concern with the nuclear aspect of that.